Alrighty, what's going on? Going into a new season, I always like to do a little trinket review. I think it's always kind of fun to kind of guess what might be good, what might be bad. Mainly specifically looking at warrior stuff, obviously, but it is fun to see some potentially overpowered shit for other classes as well. So let's take a look, and we'll start with the raid trinkets, and then we'll go down, and I have the rest of the Season 2 dungeons here. So we'll look at the raid trinkets and then the dungeon trinkets. I don't know if everything is in here yet. I think there are some from the new dungeons, but I don't know if they're everything from the new dungeons down below. So, universal trinkets. Deal yourself in, granting you a bunch of mastery, or a random amount of mastery for 20 seconds. Stack in the deck, increase the minimum mastery on feature hands by X amount until you leave comp. So I guess this will grant you the max amount of mastery towards the end to leave combat up to 3 times. 2-minute cooldown. It sounds good for us, but the problem is it's 2-minute, right? 2-minute cooldown. This can probably be very, very good because it's universal, right? But for 2-minute and mastery, I'm thinking enhancement shaman. I'm thinking elemental shaman with running 2-minute ascendance, right? Those are just the classes I kind of play. I mean, this could be really good for Hunter. Kind of wants more crit, maybe with the MM rework. Maybe you'll use it. Mastery is still good in like AoE for Beast Mastery, so you could pair it with Dark Ranger and Call of the Wild. That's 2 minutes. So it could be there's a lot of potential here as far as 2 minutes. The other class, I don't know exactly what kind of stats they want. But it has potential to be decent for someone, right? It's not going to be a wasted trinket. The other one, Mastery. Equip your spells and abilities, have a chance to empower the eye and grant you primary stat up to 20 times, decaying rapidly and leaving combat. When fully empowered, the eye instead deals a bunch of fire damage to enemies or heals allies. For that one, that's a really interesting passive trinket. I don't know how long it's going to take to stack up, but if it has damage and healing, generally it's not something that a DPS is going to want unless it's very overtuned. This is something potentially... I mean, let's see, how much primary stat is that? 20 times, that's 4. So at eye level, it'll be more primary stat when maxed out, so maybe... It's mastery and it's primary stat, so potentially depending on... if you can keep the stacks up, this could be really good for like Frost Decay, maybe, because of the enhanced strength, but being able to use it correctly and having enough uptime of it and having that uptime be high enough, I don't know if it is going to be worth using, but it has potential. It's interesting. It's probably a decent passive trinket, but we'll just have to see. Obviously, it'll be good in raid fights because you'll just get mastery plus a lot of primary stat. And I guess while it's empowered, when you... I'm assuming what will happen is instead of gaining a stack, it'll do damage or heal allies. But the reason why I don't think it'll probably be used by many DPS is normally when effects either do damage or heal, DPS generally don't go towards that because we're trying to do the most damage as possible. I could see this on a very mastery-heavy healer, potentially. I don't know if like Resto Druid or Resto Shaman want that, but it could be good for them. And as a trinket that provides primary stat and mastery, because it does damage as well, it could be good for healers since it just essentially it's free damage for them. Gear Grinder Spare Keys. Launch a Gear Grinder Trike to its final blaze of glory, exploding on impact. When the first enemy in its path deals... That's a lot of damage. That's 1.3 million damage split between all nearby enemies. It's a damage trinket. I mean, depending on how the other trinkets interact with players' kits, it might be useful. Maybe it could be useful, like if there's a damage check and a healer might want it, since anyone can use it. But normally these trinkets tend to be either overtuned to the point where they're worth taking and using on cooldown, or they're not tuned high enough and you take something else. But at 2-minute, I mean, it's probably not going to be something that we want. could kind of be just like a big single target trinket like the like Mad Queen's Mandate is right now, but the damage seems, maybe it'll scale, maybe the damage will be way higher, but the damage doesn't seem nearly as high as Mad Queen's even at eye level. Maybe it's because it does AoE, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see, and depends on how well it can crit, what crit source it takes from. Okay, tank trinkets. Tank trinkets. So summon the pit bot to assist you for 5 seconds, coding nearby enemies with rancid mortar oil for additional threat. Gyardo ensures you take the blame. Well, this is weird. This is minute and 30 cooldown, but so I guess this is the on use. This might be good for like snap threat or something. I mean, this seems okay, but it's not very defensive. It's just like a snap threat trinket because it increases the additional threat. That's weird. It's a weird trinket. I don't know if anyone's really going to use this. It might do like good AoE damage for tanks and like Mythic Plus. Maybe because it's fire damage. It can be turned into chaos damage through like Vengeance DH through their talents, but or does only Havoc get the mastery that turns it in? I think only Havoc gets the mastery that turns it into that. But who knows, maybe it'll be affected by that. Maybe it might be good for Vengeance, I don't know. But it doesn't seem too great. This one I read, however, this one seems kind of like really, really good. This one, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wear this as a warrior, but like for Mythic Plus, this thing might be like crazy strong. However, there's a pretty big downside to it, and it's only good versus a certain type of damage. Falling below 75% health surrounds a player with a protective vortex, reducing damage taken by 50% for 15 seconds or until 1,000,000 damage is prevented. This will obviously scale up with item level. This effect may only occur once every 30 seconds. After 20 seconds without activating while in combat, your scrap shield overheats and energizes you with haste. So even while it's a defensive trinket, but even while it's not active, you do get bonus haste from it, which is very, very nice. Depending on the damage types we're looking at, this might be really fucking good for us in Mythic Plus, mainly because it'll give us haste. It is a strength trinket, obviously. It will do less damage than other trinkets, but if we need to live, getting stamina from reinforced plates is obviously going to be good, but having 1,000,000 damage reduction, basically it's a 1,000,000 damage ignore pain every 30 seconds. Imagine you're doing a boss like in Halls of Infusion, the third boss that just did pulsing AoE damage all the time. Imagine any Agi or Strength user actually being able to use this trinket and just providing themselves with that extra defensive layer the whole time. It has potential use. I don't know if it's worse for DPS if used by DPS. It says valid only for tank specialization, so I think that maybe means roll on it. We should be able to wear it still, even as DPS, but this thing is potentially interesting. I don't know if it'll be good. It's going to do less damage than a real trinket, so if we do not need it, obviously we won't really want it, but this could be very, very good for us, and it could be very, very good for tanks. Especially rolling into a pack. Imagine every time you roll into a brand new pack, you pull a brand new pack, it provides you with a good amount of damage reduction for the intro to packing and grouping everything. It could be really good for tanks too. I don't know. It's definitely not going to be a damage overall good trinket, but it is possible that this thing has some interesting applications. And when the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I do like it because it can be very useful depending on like the boss or something like that. Combustible bomb suit. Haste. Rapidly deploy the bomb suit to reduce damage taken by 75% for 20 seconds or until 6. Is that 6 million at 623? This thing's gonna be crazy. Or until a bunch of damage is prevented. Upon depletion, the bomb suit detonates to deal damage. Dude, that's gonna be this thing's shield is gonna be like as big. This is gonna be essentially a second, an extra defensive for tanks. if this number is correct. If this 6 million number is correct, this is crazy. Crazy high. This is also, I mean, at 1:30, I guess it's also something we can technically, other people could technically use since it's haste. Everyone could use this, that you might need to use to survive some crazy big damage hit within later phases or high-end Mythic Plus, so maybe this will have some use. But at 1:30, it's definitely something you could use to rotate between your defensives. It's basically an extra defensive, and this might be very, very good if this damage is accurate. So, very, very interesting. It might be worth a pickup if nobody else wants it. Plus, you can use it for... you'll be able to use it for crests. But I do think on Prague, your tanks might actually want this thing. So yeah, these tank trinkets are actually seem pretty good for the tank thing, and we could use it for potential, or it could have potential use for us, although realistically, like I said, it won't do as much damage as a real damage trinket, but it's to be seen if we have any good damage trinkets for that. Let's see, healing trinkets, Mr. Pick-Me-Up. Your healing spells and abilities have a chance to summon Mr. Pick-Me-Up, firing a healing beam that jumps between 5 and your targets. Just passive healing. Overhealing irradiates allies to deal nature damage to nearby enemies over a second and a half, increased by additional overhealing. So I actually like this. It's a healing trinket that heals, but if nobody is healed, it still does something. It still does damage. I do like this. It seems pretty nice, but it might not be exactly what a healer would want. Depending on what stats they want, that kind of thing. Become the pinnacle of the Galagio Service Excellence and dole out Kaja Cola Megalite to injured allies 10 times over 4 seconds, healing them and increasing their speed. The number of servings is increased by your haste. Contains 0.01% Kajamite. This trinket is fun. Like, this is actually a very fun trinket. Minute 30-second cooldown means you can use it quite a bit. I wonder if you have enough haste, you could actually, like, hit your entire raid with this and give your entire raid speed, which might be cool, but the fact that it has no primary stat, that it's primary haste, it's a very fun trinket, but it does not seem good enough, because it's only 1, 2, 3, it's only 300k healing. And without big health bars, and I don't know, it's a fun little trinket. I think the trinket is super fun, but I do not know if this will actually be useful. It might be useful in like a case where you want to give everybody speed, because I think this is like this is like maybe 4 or 5% speed, but I don't really think it'll be used very much. It's not throughput healing. It has no primary stat. And it's a fun little effect. It's cool. People will be able to use it for crests and stuff like that, but I don't see it being very useful in like trinkets. 3-minute cooldown. Reignite the pilot light to gain 10,000 intellect for 15 seconds. After casting 3 harmful spells, it unleashes a beam dealing a bunch of fire damage to your primary target and damage up to 5 enemies in its path. That's a lot of intellect. But it's not a 3-minute cooldown. I mean, like, haste, 3-minute cooldown intellect trinket, like Boomkin maybe, but isn't Boomkin like 2-minute now with Incarn? I don't know, the 3 minutes kind of throwing me off, because I don't know many casters that are... I know a lot of casters are like 2 minutes, right? I mean, maybe this could be okay with like... You don't take 2-minute ascendants and it's okay, it's good, but like you probably just want 2-minute ascendants because that's really good. Who knows? I mean, this might be good for a handful of classes, but 3 minutes is a very, very long cooldown cycle, which I don't really think there's a lot of classes that run 3-minute. And even if you're a 1.5-minute class, maybe 3 minutes okay, but having, I don't know. I don't like trinkets that have too high of a cooldown. The effect seems pretty good, obviously, like... It has a lot of intellect for 15 seconds. but it's also not as much intellect as you might want, considering that you also get a damage part after casting 3 spells. So, I don't know. Maybe it'll be overtuned and it'll be good, but I'm not sure how I feel about a 3-minute cooldown trinket. At least with the classes I play, I understand there could be a class that would enjoy it more. Mug Moxie Jug. The word Moxie is hastily scribbled on. Your spells have a chance to send you into a frenzy, granting you critical strike for 15 seconds. While frenzied, each spell cast grants an additional critical strike, but may not refresh the duration. Passive crit trinket? Might have a use. I don't know what... I'm not sure what casters are very, very crit-centric. Maybe, like, could be good on, like, Fire Mage, maybe? But even then, it doesn't seem like you're really controlling when you go into a frenzy, so might not be good if they can't work it around their combust window. It's also int, so other crit-based classes can't use it. I mean, it's a passive trinket, right? So maybe it'll be good. It's just passive crit chance on top of intellect, so could be solid, but it might not be exactly what people want depending on what else is available. Agi trinkets. The Thugs Hotline, dude. All I remember is the fucking, I don't know if it was Boondocks or maybe it was Adult Swim, but it was the talk shit hotline. I don't know if you might not know what I'm talking about, but you could call the numbers and be like, yeah, I want to talk to a thug. You talk shit back and forth to each other. This is the hotline. Remember me of that. Your abilities, say a strength or agi. So let's see. Your ability to have a chance to call a member of the goon squad to attack your target. Gaining bloodlust or a similar effect summons the whole crew, so this will be good for your lust window. What is the goon squad? Yeah, I don't know what the goon squad does. Maybe just this could be good, but I don't know what this does yet. They could provide you passive buffs, passive benefits. If it's like if you could get like a healer out of it, I don't know if that'll be any good. But for a passive trinket, it might be good. We'll just have to see what it actually does, because I have no way to tell what this thing does. This one is specifically agi. Your damaging abilities have a very high chance to charge the magnet up to 30 times. Reverse a magnet's polarity to violently recycle buried garbage, dealing plague damage to your target per charge. Lingering virulence deals 10% of the damage dealt to 5 nearby enemies over 6 seconds. 20-second cooldown. So you could just like spam is this something that you're just gonna like use all the time? I mean, it is possible that you build up a bunch of charges and you can put this in a burst window. I mean, it's kind of like a Agi Spy Masters, but it just does damage instead of gives you intellect. It could be good if there's like a shield you need to break or a big pop you need to do, depending on what your class runs. Like if, for example, I think some trinkets, their damage or healing or absorption or whatever is affected by versatility, and Outlaw Rogue being a very high versatility crit spec, this could be very, very good for Outlaw Rogue as an example. However, I'm not sure if there will be better trinkets for that class. But as a trinket, it's interesting. You just build up a bunch of garbage and then use the garbage to hit your target with. So that's fun. I like this thing. That's fun. But it's Agi only. Let's see. The Thugs Hotline. And then this one is... So this one is strength specific, looks like. Because if you look at the effect, it specifically says strength. Mastery Trinket. Unleash your inner tempest to gain a bunch of strength for 15 seconds. Your next 3 abilities will cause a lightning blast, dealing damage to your primary target. Damage is increased 100% with each subsequent blast. So I mean, like, it'll do more and more damage, but it's got a 3-minute cooldown, man. We're maybe using this once, twice. I mean, if there's a really, really long boss fight, like maybe this thing stacks up and does a bunch of damage towards the end of it, then it might be worth using. But for a strength trinket, 3 minutes? Like, this is basic. Like, yeah, you get a bunch of strength, but like, it's a big single target trinket, but like 3 minutes, man. That means that you'll use it on pull, and then for warriors at least, you'll go through 2 cooldown cycles without it. Rep paladins, like every 30 seconds, they'll go through a bunch of cooldown cycles without it with just mastery. Unholy and Frost Decay, I mean, they want static strength. Like, there's really good trinkets for Frost Decay and Unholy Decay. Especially if you're on double unuse between like Transmitter, Mark of Kadros, and Skarmock Shard. All of these trinkets are very, very good for a lot of melee strength-based classes. But once again, 3 minutes. Like, for pure single target, this thing might be good. The mastery on it is kind of low. But here's the other thing. With how Warrior is going to be, at least with what they've shown us, I think this thing has some potential, but it has potential for some of the wrong reasons. And that being that, let's say we have like a 10-minute fight in the tier, or maybe a 10 or 12-minute fight in the tier, right? It is possible that, especially with how Titan's Torment and the new Reckless Abandon work together, the amount of bonus strength you're gaining, plus just the flat damage, this could make us one of the strongest 3-minute burst classes in the entire game. Using this trinket on top of the Titan's Torment plus the Reckless Abandon changes. I don't know if I like that. I already don't like how much of our damage is tied to our cooldowns in the first place. But for dealing, I mean, that's what? At this level, it's 450k. Next time is 900k. Next time... So in a 9-minute fight, this thing might do... Like, if this number is accurate, at this eye level, this thing might do, like, 1.8 mil, which seems very, very, very low for a 3-minute trinket. I mean, obviously you get the proc, but I don't know, man. It might be useful. It might have some kind of execute-based centric interaction where the strength we use is good. Maybe there's some weird, crazy test of might arms warrior shit where we're using this all the way at the end of execute phase, and we have this giant, this massive test of might with this big bonus strength window, and we're doing crazy damage. It has potential, but I really don't think we're going to be using a 3-minute trinket. I really don't think so. I don't know what melee class would want to use a 3-minute trinket, just because, like, maybe if there's some weird, like, parse meta where you're using this thing for pure single target, it might be decent, but I don't know. We will have to see. Miscellaneous trinkets. Currently missing their descriptions and do not fit the categories above. Precision blasting, causing to do Mr. Lock and Stock. I mean, this is just a haste trinket with... Let's see, recalibrate your spells and abilities, have a high chance to laser your target for precision blasting, calling in to deal... Yeah, I don't know exactly. I mean, it's just a passive damage trinket, I guess, but it's a 20-second on use. I don't know. I can't even judge this thing. It's very weird. And this thing has no stats to it yet. But potentially, if this gives us just static primary stat or something like that, this could be very good for us. It's one of the stats we like for arms and fury, but because we don't know what it really does yet, we will have to see. Now we get to the fun part, the new dungeon trinkets. None of these I have looked at all, but they could be good. Could be good. Improvised C-form pacemaker. What? Repurpose a C-form charge to give your heart a kick, causing your first ability every 60 seconds to trigger explosive adrenaline, getting critical strike for 15 seconds. While exploding, critical strikes cause you to blow up again, extending this duration up by 1 second up to 15 times. So it's like an AoE crit trinket. I mean, this could be good for... This could be a good, like, passive trinket for, like, Outlaw Rogue, maybe. Outlaw likes crit. And then, I mean, Arms Warrior also likes crit, so maybe, but it'll do some damage, give you some crit. We'll see. It might be decent, might be not. Every 6 seconds, zap your target and one nearby enemy for nature damage. Intellect. Casting 30 spells turbocharges you for 15 seconds, doubling the frequency of your zaps and upgrading them to gigazaps, dealing bonus nature. So it's just damage. Might be like a good healer trinket for just doing damage. I don't know. But that's a decent amount of damage every 6 seconds, like as a healer, just passive damage. That could be good. Versatility. Become Mudborn, absorbing damage and pulsing nature over 10 seconds. Periodic damage you take coalesces into pungent mud to feed the ritual, reducing this cooldown by 22 seconds. So... Tank Trinket does AoE damage. Periodic damage you take coalesces into pungent mud. Does that have to be periodic, like dot damage, or can you just take any damage? Because it could be decent, but I don't know. I don't know, man. Absorb and some AoE damage is good. The one thing I'm worried about is if this Mudborn effect, the damage is tied to the absorption, so only as long as you're absorbing damage that you're doing damage. This thing would probably be pretty bad for tanks, since you won't be able to actually, like, use the full effect. But if the damage absorb and the pulsing damage are different buff effects, this might actually be somewhat decent. Especially since they're probably going to be stacking or wanting verse anyway, so it's decent damage. Become Mudborn. Intellect. Become Mudborn, rapidly absorbing damage and pulsing nature damage every 10 seconds. Periodic damage you take coalesce into pungent mud to feed the ritual, reducing... This is weird, man. These trinkets are weird. Intellect with, like... I mean, maybe this might have some kind of, like, Mythic Plus property where you're doing damage, but it's more of, like, an extra defensive. And if you're taking, like, pulsing AoE damage, maybe it'll reduce the cooldown, so it's like 1:30, maybe even closer to a minute. I don't know. Has potential, but casters generally want trinkets that do something or give primary stat. Especially ones where... It says... Yeah, this probably also has a 2-minute cooldown. It doesn't say, but it looks like it has a 2-minute cooldown. So anything you'd be using, like if this... Yeah, this would probably stop you from using a damage trinket. So normally you want a passive trinket, and then that'll give you some form of stat, and then an active trinket that'll give you even more stat or a different stat. So it might be just a fun thing, maybe not like super useful, but we will see. Dark Fuse Medi Chopper. Command the chopper to attach your target, absorbing damage, granting them versatility for 15 seconds. While attached, your healing spells have a chance to refuel, granting these bonuses to their host again. So I guess it's just this could be good. It could be just like a secondary, an on use for your tanks. Interestingly enough, this isn't like a mastery or a haste trinket. One of the things people really like to use back in, I think it was season 3 with the Everbloom trinket, the leaf, it had a 1 minute cooldown to put a shield on somebody, but tanks, because it had mastery, actually used that. So if this was not pure intellect and was maybe haste or mastery or something, or versatility or something like that, yeah, I could see another class potentially using it, but this might be good for healers just as an extra defensive for somebody. If they're taking extra damage. Could be useful, could be not. We'll have to see on what the numbers are. Cujo's Flame Vents. Channel for 2 seconds, venting flame damage to all enemies with 8 yards. Mechanical enemies become superheated, taking bonus damage from your next attack. Equip channel. Okay, so it's just a 2-minute active that does AoE fire damage, but good against mechanic. I mean, pretty niche. I doubt we're going to be using it. But that's a look at the raid trinkets, at least. Some of them might be okay, but right now, I've just been looking for minute 30 trinket, and the only minute 30 trinket I've seen so far is a combustible bomb suit, and that's purely defensive. So raid trinkets aren't looking too great for us. I'm going to be honest. Not looking too great for Warrior. So let's go to the Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain. Viscera of Coalesced Hatred. This thing, when we got it in Shadowlands, we did not use it. It wasn't very good, but it's like, hey, it's a strength trinket, I guess. Soul Lightning Ruby was very, very good for casters, and probably because it's an on-demand crit trinket at 2-minute cooldown, this will probably be one of the go-to caster trinkets to get. It was very good in Shadowlands and will probably continue to be very good in the War Within. Viral Spectral Essence. Bind a target, cause an ally. Nobody really used this in Shadowlands. Yeah, it's a minute 30 on use. Yeah, this probably won't be used. It's a minute 30 on use that puts a debuff on the enemy that has your team heal them. It's like old Paladin Blessing of the Light, where attacking somebody would grant you health from hitting them. But it is a consumable effect, probably doesn't last very long. And it has a burst of heal afterwards, but it doesn't seem very, very good. It's also a minute 30 trinket, and it's not a 2-minute on use trinket or has a very defensive property like the other trinkets, so I doubt it will be used. Grim Codex adds your strength. Conjure Spectral Sight, it's just damage. It's a minute 30. It does not give us any stats, and it's just damage. I doubt anyone uses this. It's just a flat damage trinket, and most flat damage trinkets are not very good. So unless it is overtuned, it is not something we will be using. Over to the Cinderbrew Meadery. Trinkets. Cinderbrew Stein. A tank specialist is occasionally share a drink with allies who assist you in combat, granting them primary stat and absorbing damage. You take a sip as well, granting primary stat and absorbing damage. When falling below 50% health, you take an emergency sip. They may only... This is actually not too bad when I consider what a tank trinket is. It's a bit more RNG than I would like, but it is a passive tank trinket that will actually grant your allies an absorption shield, which can be very good in High Mythic Plus. But the number on it is quite low. At 437, it is only 19k absorption shield, so I guess the primary stat effect is only really what's going to be good. But with the loss of Augmentation Evoker and the loss of that kind of primary stat, tanks are probably going to be looking at something a little more defensive. I think the defensive tank or trinkets from Raid will do probably way more for them compared to something like this, but it has potential to be useful in some cases. Like if a tank is very, very safe, this is technically just like increased group damage, but if there's a trinket they can use that increases their damage more than this, like the Ravenous Honey Buzzer, which just does flat damage, it might be good. The fun thing about the Ravenous Honey Buzzer, they fixed the effect on this, but for some reason, the fire damage split between all enemies did not actually split originally, so you just use this trinket and it just did that amount of damage to everything, which was really good. But obviously, it's a flat damage trinket. It splits between targets. It might be decent. It's a minute and a half, but the other thing too about this trinket is it does physically move your character. You get on a bee and you physically move your character for, I think it's like 10 yards or something like that. So might not be what people want. But once again, most people do not use flat damage trinkets. It is a minute 30, which is something we're looking for, but it is split flat damage, so it's probably not going to be that great unless the bug comes back and we're able to use this thing to do full mass AoE damage without any of the fall off, which I doubt will happen. And this is the Synergistic Brutalizer. Equip your sales chance have a chance to charge the device and request a backfire barrel near your target's location. Damaging the barrel causes it to explode. I mean, it's kind of cool, but that means you're going to have to cast a spell on the barrel. Maybe this could be good for like a fire mage with ignite, and it auto blows up the barrel and it's fire damage, so your bonus fire damage deals more damage, maybe? I don't know, but once again, passive damage trinkets like this are generally not that great. But if there's no other good passive trinkets, this might be something worth using. But there are some passive crit trinkets that we saw in the raid that might be way better than this as your passive slot. Now to Dark Flame Cleft. This dungeon is going to be a menace if it continues to be the way it is, but we'll see. Your attacks have a chance to direct a Cobalt cart towards your enemy, sending... It's just a damage trinket. Split between enemies, damage trinket. Agi. It's just, depending on tuning, might be good, might be bad. It's just damage, who cares? Spells has boost the caster. Burning Candle to increase your versatility. I mean, increased versatility can be decent, but this is a random drop. You might not be able to stand near it, and it's versatility, which is generally the caster's worst stat, so I'm just disregarding it altogether. Burn the Candle King, carve away a wax copy, which absorbs damage taken. Absorption heats up the wax, causing it to melt after absorbing. So it absorbs like... It's like an extra defensive. I mean, this could have... It's a intellect trinket that's an extra defensive. This could have potential to be your, like, quote-unquote passive trinket slot on high keys if you need an extra defensive, because it is simply just a damage absorption effect, which will reduce 50% from a hit, which could be very good. So, has potential. Might be used in niche situations, but realistically, for most people, does not do damage, will not equip. But it could have a potential use in high keys. Your abilities have a chance to call the darkness to you, increasing your primary stat. Upon reaching full power, the darkness is unleashed, dealing shadow damage. So it's another primary stat trinket that doesn't start with primary stat and then just ends up doing AoE damage. So it's just a stat trinket with AoE, but you don't get the full stat. It's pure passive. It's probably not really going to be worth using. Might be okay for tanks, I don't know, but if I was personally a tank, I'd rather just have the primary stat all the time instead of your abilities have a chance to call the darkness to you, increasing your primary stat, because then you'll just go into packs significantly weaker than you normally would be, which is not something you want. So, I'll be real, these trinkets, we only got a couple dungeons left, and these trinkets aren't looking very good for Warrior. These trinkets aren't looking very good for Warrior. Agi Trinket, hold out the feather for 11 seconds? What? Maybe it's supposed to be 1? Hold out the feather for X seconds to strike with the power of the storm, crashing down the target location, inflicting nature damage split between nearby enemies. That's a decent amount of damage, but it's just, once again, damage trinket. It's not passive. It'll be used actively. Might not be that great. Your abilities have a chance to call in earthen allies supporting you in combat. Do we know what these do? What the effect actually does? Spawns a crossbowman, spawns a healer, spawns a guy that does nature damage, that has both AoE and once again, just passive damage trinket. Completely depends on whether or not the effects are good, but apparently, even from early time, the trinkets have been looking great. Critical strike, your spells as range trinket have a chance to destabilize a void energy, releasing a corrupted fragment, retrieving the fragment, briefly infuse you with this power, increasing the intellect button. I mean, some of these trinkets might be okay, but that's a low amount of intellect for a trinket like this. Maybe you can get multiple stacks of this thing, but that also means you're going to have to be visually looking for these splinters that fall down and going and grabbing them yourselves. And that sounds like it sucks, man. I don't think this trinket's going to be very good. And I guess that's it. I mean, dude, we only have we have one dungeon left. And we have, like, no trinkets to look forward to. I don't like the look of this. Signet of the Priory. Raise your signet to the light, increasing your higher secondary stat for 20 seconds. Your act inspires nearby signet bearers, increasing them same stat for 20 seconds. 2-minute cooldown. This is something that I think people used pretty early on, actually, for a 2-minute cooldown. It is a primary stat with a high secondary stat. 2-minute. So this is something that probably a lot of people that run 2 minutes are going to want. It synergizes together. It gives you a big bulk of primary stat when you use it. It could be very good for every single 2-minute class, but for warriors, probably not. We only have a couple trinkets to look at. Equip advance to the 50 verses of inner resilience. Reading as you are attacked. It's tank trinket. Inner resilience increases your armor by 97 and grants your attacks a chance to invoke a ward which absorbs magic damage when finished. Sift through the passages of another chapter. I mean, this is like a weird tank trinket that has like small absorbs in it with no primary stat. Increase your armor? Probably dog shit. I'm going to be real. Probably not great. Summon a bursting light spawn which sacrifices health to unleash bursts of light, inflicting a bunch of holy damage split between nearby enemies. Intellect trinket. Nearby enemies while it lives. I mean, depending on how long this thing lives, it might be just a good passive damage trinket that does a bunch of AoE damage. Might be okay, but I hate to tell ya, but we're at the end of the road. We are at the end of the road here, and let me go back to, let me re-pull this thing back up. Toys, no, we can just go into history, sigil. Oh, hey, season 2 dungeon. No, not that one. I must have had this thing open from before. Let's go into the news section. Models, pinned. First look at trinkets. Here we go. I mean, if we're looking at warrior stuff, man, I'm kind of worried. A lot of these trinkets are not very good for us. I mean, like, maybe we can use this as like a passive trinket, and then we have the big red button as our active trinket every 3 minutes, but there's not a single good 2 or minute and a half trinket in this entire dungeon pool. Including the raid, there's not a good minute and a half trinket. There is this 3-minute trinket, so every 3 uses, it syncs up. But that means that outside of that 3-minute window, we don't have a really good trinket to use. I mean, every single season, they've given us some kind of minute and a half trinket. I mean, like, This trinket here, this boombox thing, if this is a haste trinket that like the transmitter, every minute and a half, like it pops an active that gives us bonus strength or something. This could save us. This could save us if it was a minute and a half trinket that gave us primary stat or a bunch of mastery or higher secondary stat or something like that, right? This thing could be good and it could save us, but right now, our trinket choice is terrible. Like, actually not great. Like, pretty damn bad. There's not a single good minute and a half active trinket for us to go on. We cannot use 2-minute trinkets because it does not synchronize with our cooldown timings. There are, I mean, maybe we are running like double passive trinket, the critical strike one, and like a different one, maybe that just does damage. Maybe the thugs, the goon squad, who knows, man. But a 3-minute cooldown trinket that provides less strength than the transmitter at twice the cooldown, but just has a damage effect tied to it. That's not what I was looking for, man. That's not what I was looking for. And I really hope that this trinket is like a minute and a half on use. It really feels like it should be, because they have given us a minute and a half on use trinket every single tier that I have played this video game that has been decent and useful for us to use. And so far, there is not. And that is concerning. Very, very concerning. So, I mean, like, I'd be fine using 2 passive trinkets, but at the same time, not having an active trinket that's good is normally really, really bad for you. Because trinkets are very powerful and function as a very large part of our damage. So, yeah. It's not looking good, lads. It's not looking good. Maybe this thing will be updated later and we'll find out, but otherwise, that's kind of it. I didn't expect this to take this long, but here we are. We went through all the trinkets and it's not looking great. Okay, bye-bye. I don't know, man. I don't know.